A very good evening to all of you, all the participants, all the members in the house who are joining us online. I'm your host. My name is Parth Saxena, and I'm presently a student at Masters Union School of Business. Today, we have a person who's much of like a star in the PM field, Mr. Shravan Tikku himself. Mr. Tikku graduated from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, in 2015 in the discipline of metallurgical engineering. Post that, he has been a product manager for Flipkart, Blackbucks, Yudhareka, you name it. He has been a consultant. He has his own YouTube channel that goes by the name Swagwala PM, and his presence is even on Twitter, which is actively followed. I am one of the several thousands of followers that follows him, and I've been following him for quite some time. Today's workshop is regarding wireframes, and a little housekeeping rules over here. We will have 40 minutes of Shravan taking us through the workshop. All the participants can post their questions in the QA and A section. And after 40 minutes, we'll take in all the questions. So without further ado, Shravan, the full floor is of yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Parth. Those are very, very kind words. I don't know if I'm worthy of that praise, but then again, yeah. So thank you very much, guys, for coming in. I think you have followed me primarily on the YouTube videos, so I'll keep it very informal, very simple for folks to understand. And we'll start off with the very basics of product management, right? So what I intend to do is, can you just, Parth, can you just pin my video? Primarily, I think that would be lovely for folks to effectively, give me a second. Yep, awesome. Awesome. So what I want to do is, before I even venture into wireframes, there are some of the things that I essentially want to talk about, and I want all of you folks to effectively answer in your primarily in your chat window, right? I don't want, and let's keep this session very interactive, very simple to understand, very, very easy to understand, right? So I think before we start, and that I have always focused primarily on this aspect, that why do you do things, right? Product management is more about understanding the value that specifically a product adds in a person's life, and primarily from a happiness quotient standpoint, right? Even before we venture into the fact that we have to build a wireframe or we have to write a PRD, the first thing that you need to ask for, and today's session is primarily on wireframing, is that why do you even need a wireframe? Like, why does a product manager even do that, right? So give me a sense, guys, right? Just write whatever is there in your head, and probably let's keep it very, very interactive in that sense. Yeah. Why do you specifically, why does a UX designer, and you must have heard this term, that you build wireframes, you take it to the design team, then the design team builds mocks on top of it, and then the mocks are taken to the engineering team, and then they effectively try to build the product. But why do you need them, right? Awesome. So Dushant says to convey ideas in a physical manner, easy way to communicate, to help visualize what we're trying to build. Okay, fair enough, right? So I think the fundamental thing that you need to understand is wireframes are not a representation of your product. They are not a visual representation of your product. They are specifically a way to communicate what the product is intended to do, right? From two aspects, right? One, that what do you want the user to effectively see and do? Right? That's the first part. The second part is, what is the intended action the business wants the user to do? Right? So the first part, I'll repeat it again. First part, what do you want the user to do specifically and derive value from? Right? And second, is it overlapping with what the business also wants as a fundamental action that you effectively have to derive for, right? Now, initially, that there are 4 layers of design. I'm just taking like 5 minutes on that aspect, and then I'll quickly move towards how do you effectively make. The first layer of design is something called conceptual design, right? Conceptual design basically means, let's assume like I'll ask you a very simple question. Why do you think Uber has a map-like design? Let me ask you this why do you think that Uber has a fundamental interface that you open the app and you see maps there, right? You see the cabs primarily over there, or Swiggy for that matter has such an interface in which it shows food, right? So the fundamental reason for that from a conceptual design standpoint is that is something that once that anybody thinks about, that, okay, if I'm using a transportation app, the first thing that I would conceptualize in my head is that I want to move from one place to another. And what is the simplest way to move from one place to another is that if I can visualize that from where I'm standing and where I have to go, right? So conceptual design is that layer, right? Primarily where you can visualize, where anybody from his experiences, the user can fundamentally visualize that what the product should look like, right? Or this is somehow the product should be like, like that, then only it makes sense. Like for example, if Uber would have given you an interface like Make My Trip, like from and to, without showing you any map, it would have been very hard for you to visualize that where the cab is, when will it come, what's the ETA of the cab. So ideally, the conceptual design is something that where PMs spend a lot of their time, the why part of it. Once the conceptual design is figured out, right, that this is something that this is how it should look like, then you effectively move to a layer which is called information design, right? That I fundamentally know that a person would want to visualize this particular thing in a fundamental conceptual manner, but what is the layer of information that should be on top of it so that it is easily consumable by the customer? For example, let me put it this way. If you go to makemytrip.com, right, and you see a from and to there, assume that the from and to was in the bottom of the page. Do you think users would have stayed on the website? Give me a yes or no. Right? If the from and to on makemytrip.com, where you book flight tickets, is absolutely in the bottom of the page, right? So that would not happen, right? So information design is that layer, right, where you functionally try to put information in such a manner that the most relevant information for somebody to take that intended action, right, is functionally easily discoverable. Right? That is the reason any of the flight ticketing websites, even though their UI, their color scheme, all of those things will be different, but their information structure is always that if you go to Make My Trip, Clear Trip, ixigo.com, everybody, it's everywhere, it's from to what the number of users, which date, that's it. Right? So that information is very clear that it's a flight ticket booking website. Right? Now, once these two layers are done, then comes another layer, and this is where the functional layer of wireframing comes in, which is the information design and the interaction design. Right? Basically, if a user comes on a wireframe, what will happen if I click on a particular button? Like if I want to do add to cart, what exactly should I do? Right? Now, in order to do that, right, let me just quickly share my screen. So let's take an example, very simple example of interaction design. So I have taken here an example of basically we're trying to build something like a Flipkart premium app, where my fundamental intent is that the user should be able to figure out a premium product, which can be a Zara watch, which can be a mobile phone, which can be anything, in a very easy manner. Right? In a very simple manner, right? Now, try to understand, try to visualize it from an e-commerce platform. An e-commerce platform at a conceptual design level has fundamentally millions of products, right? Now, if you want to figure out a particular, and web page is web page, it's a small page, it's an infinite scroll, something like that. But at a particular time, you can only show 3 or 4 products, or maybe 5, max to max 10, but that would be like 0.0001% of the total products on the platform. Right? Now, if in order, what is the first thing that typically comes, that I want to buy a shirt, and you go on a website, what is the, and specifically on a website which has like millions of products, what would be the easiest way from a conceptual design perspective that a user would be able to do it? And that is something that Google was able to do long back, which is building something like search. Right? Search is something that today you go on Google, and Parth has some reason to go on Google. I have some reason to go on Google. It's not like I go on a first go on a website, try to figure out things. I straight away go to Google, type that term, click enter, and I get the top results. Right? And that is why if you open any e-commerce website in general, you would see that the first thing on that screen is the search bar. There's a logic to it. It's not like वैसे ही बना दिया हो. There is a functional logic to it. The logic to it is because they want you to discover from a large catalog of products, most relevant products of yours. So what we do is, once this is figured out, the first thing that we do while for building a wireframe is something that even before we build a wireframe, we build something like a flowchart, which is called a wireframe flowchart. That basically, this is the discovery of information that should happen. And then I will translate that into a particular wireframe, which can be a design layer or whatever and whatnot. So what I did, I created a small flowchart. I started off by first building like a common area that you see outside it, that which shows that this is the area of focus where the customer has to see, right? So, and I decide that area of focus as the home page of the app. because that is the intent. I am going to flipkart.com to find my product, not to see the products they are promoting. Right? That's a separate intent. That might be a secondary intent, that something is launched and you're really, really happy about it. An iPhone is launched and you want to promote that, right? But the first thing is that I want the discovery of the user very, very easy, right? So I opened and I came to, I will discuss the tools and etc. by myself only, but a very simple tool to design any flowchart, which is very, very easy and free to use, is something called draw.io. So you can, I'll just put it in the chat window. Right, this is the tool which is absolutely free. Right, you can just click on draw.io and you open across that particular window. This is a tool which is more like a wireframing and a flowchart builder, which is absolutely free to use. So what I did is I quickly came here, and you see there are a bunch of things on over here. On the left hand side, you see a bunch of shapes. On the you also see a bunch of diagrams or bunch of pictures that you are able to put, and then some miscellaneous parts of it that basically if you want a certain structure like a mobile phone structure or an arrow or whatever, and whatever you want to use it to build a flowchart on the left hand side. And on the top you see a bunch of options, like if you want to make a copy, if you want to embed it, if you want to do a bunch of things. So it's more like a flowchart builder for you, absolutely free of cost to use, right? So what I do is I typically, from a conceptual design perspective and then from an information design perspective, and that is the most important element, I typically bring any of this particular box and I say that on top of it, I design an area which is on top of it. And once again, guys, I'm not teaching you how to use this tool. You are smart enough to use this tool. I'm giving you the conceptual layer behind it, that how do you think about it, right? So I typically do something like this, create a mock-up area of the flowchart and say, so this is a representation to your design team, that this is how the structure should look. This is the home page. And I just put a text on top of it, that this is the home page area. And mind you guys, this is not the design layer. This is just the information layer, right? So I'm putting it as home page and say that, wow, this is the search bar should be here. Absolutely. Right. So anybody who understands that I'm trying to build an app, right? This is the flowchart. This is the information schema. The first thing should be a search bar, right? So I'm just again going back to the flow of app, right? So once this is done, right, so I just solved the functional discovery of the user, that whatever you want to discuss, I'm not even going to come into your way. This is how you are going, he or she is going to try to figure it out. Now, what is the next thing that I spoke about? That you want to maximize business value also, right? That I also want that, okay, if a brand is collaborating with me as an e-commerce platform, because it's a supply and demand proposition, right? I also want to give discovery to certain products which are profitable to me as a business and also lucrative to you as a customer, but you are just not aware of them. Right? So what I do is I say that the second layer on top of it would be something that the launch offer of the day, which I want to promote, right? And it has multiple factors beneath it. It can be something that is getting popular day over day. It can be something that the brand wants to promote across. It can be something that is a cross common collaboration, that, okay, a brand said that I will be giving it to you on free of cost just to promote myself. So that's the second thing in the flow that I'm functionally talking about. Right. And I simultaneously, like I wrote, and then I built something even more deeper. A carousel is something like that. Then the third layer that I'm talking about is primarily like a carousel. Carousel means you see the bunch of things that are moving on the Flipkart website, that those are multiple brands, right? Now, as you move from top to bottom, the visibility and the importance of the information decreases. Right? So the launch offer of the day would be something which is like a very, very heavy collaboration or some sort of a thing that I've done, some sort of a deal that I've done with Flipkart, that Apple would say that I'll pay you 10 crore rupees. Show my banner on the top of it, because there is also a reason for it, because maximum traffic of yours in a particular digital platform is not going to go below the first fold. Right? So this slot is more like a merchandising slot. Right? That is coming from a value prop to the business. right? Now, below that, similarly, you would see a bunch of other things also, like multiple other slots. And then finally, towards the end of the bar, after the infinite scroll, you show a bunch of more things. What are those? The home page, your wish list, your shopping cart, and your account. Now, you would ask, why does that happen, right? So think of it like this, that whenever you open an app, you're using your app on the right hand or on the left, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, right? So the easier part would be that the bottom screen of the mobile phone, right, would be such that it is something that you want repetitive actions to happen, right? Because it is something like, if you are in Swiggy, there might be 100 options on the page, but certain options, you know that the user will repeat again. And what are those options? For Swiggy, for an application like Swiggy would be, what were my previous orders? Or where is my current order, right? That is something that I would want to check with every order that I make. So that's a repetitive action. So I made them stationary. I made them in such a way that I promoted them in such a way that specifically that these are actions that will be always existing for the user. Now you realize one more thing in this particular flow. The color of the Flipkart search screen is blue. Sorry guys, one more thing I would tell about you today is I'm colorblind. So if I say something of a wrong color, just miss that across, right? So just saying whether it's blue or gray, whatever that color is, it's a different color. And the bottom part is also of a different color. What it shows, it specifically shows to the designer, right, or the business person, that these particular elements on that particular flow chart are static elements. They'll not change, right? So logically, the one element is distinguishing. So this Flipkart search screen, if the color would have not been different from the carousels part, then it is almost equal. Nobody would have understood that while moving through the flow chart, what would happen, right? So I gave it a different color in order to just specify that search is something that will be always existing, whether I move to any page. And simultaneously, these four options, home, wish list, shopping cart, and account, they will always be accessible, whether the user is on any page in the application, right? Now, you see all of this, right? So this is a typical flowchart information structure from top to bottom. What else I have done here? I have tried to also give information about what these parts will do, right? Like there's on top, you see a notification bell. Notification bell is something that most companies typically tell you that something that you might have subscribed to and you have put to add to cart and you are waiting for a price decrease. So there should be a notification. So the notification, so I've just put it across and given an arrow specifically here that user gets notified at any order or browsing related notifications, right? Secondly, then I have in the flowchart, besides the flow, I've also talked about what are the elements on the flowchart would do. Yahan tak sab clear hai? Is this clear to all of you guys? Awesome, awesome, amazing, amazing. ठीक है? अब जब मैंने ये कर लिया, one more thing that you effectively see is that once somebody clicks on a window, I have also mentioned that, okay, if somebody clicks on the search window, where should the user reach, right? So you see there are two functional differentiations. One is a dark arrow. Why I have done that? It is not a general, don't think of this as a common guideline. It is just a way to distinguish things. One is an arrow which shows that the user will move from search screen to a product listing screen. That is something that will happen, right? But you also see that from the second part, when a user is moving to a category page, when I've said that somebody clicks on this particular window, the category search bar, he reaches to this screen, there is a dotted arrow, right? There has to be some logic to any action that you do in a flowchart has meaning. कुछ भी नहीं उठा के डाल सकते. You cannot put anything randomly, put arrows. There has to be some logic to it, right? So why there is a dotted arrow? The way that I've typically communicated it to my design team is that this is a primary flow, this is a secondary flow. Most of the users will follow this flow, that click on the most universal search, they will move to a particular screen, search screen, and it would eventually move to any listing page which they are looking at, right? But simultaneously, the users, there can be users who can move to a category page and yet move to the product page, right? But that is not a primary intended flow that I want, because I know for a fact that most users will not go below this, below the first fold. right? So I have specified it in a different way, right? And then I've specifically specified that what will happen. A user can move from here to here, another product info page, and primarily the user can move from a category page to a product info page. And this is typically how you functionally design a flowchart. So a flowchart has 4 considerations. One, the total information flow from top to bottom as a core flow, right? What is the core flow? The core flow here is that I want search bar. From search bar, I would ideally want the user to move to maybe the product listing page. Then from a product listing page, what I would do is to the product page. And finally, probably to the payment page, whatever it is, right? It depends on product to product. When I'm defining the core flow, I would represent it like this, typically in bold lines, which shows that it's a core flow, right? Again, I would try to put it like this. Please mind the irregularities and the badness of the flow of the UI, but I just want to give you such basic context of how it should look like, right? Then the third thing again. So this typically tells that the design team or the UI team or probably the engineering team, whosoever is reading your PRD and looking at your wireframes, that this is the core flow that I have to follow, right? Now, if something is universal, which which will not change while the user moves across the application, whatever the web, whether it's a web application, website, etc., try to put across give it a different color. Maybe provide a different color. Give me a second. Do a different color, maybe like a different color, and apply, right? Whatever it is, right? And put across a different color. Another thing that I told you, the third thing, there can be multiple, because it's a multifunctional application. It has like multiple pages. Like the BYJU'S app has like 50 pages, right? There can be 50 different flows how a person can reach to this payment page, right? So if it's a non-obvious flow, then try to put that flow in such a way. Give me a second. I'll just change the color. Right? If it's a non-obvious flow, please use the dotted lines in the flowchart payment page. So what did you understand? Whatever there are, the core flows have to be always represented by thick and dotted structures so that everybody understands that this is the area of focus. Now, there can be a very strong possibility that if somebody reaches a brand page and there's a brand flow, there is a core flow from brand page to payment page. Again, what you will do is you will show a bold line in the flowchart. So again, I'm repeating this for you. The core flows are always represented in a manner that are easy to read, easy to understand. If it's a non-obvious flow in the flowchart, right, what you effectively do is you try to connect it with a dotted line so that people understand this is not the primary flow of focus, right? But there can be a possibility that from the search bar to the brand page is not a primary flow, but from the brand page to payment page is a primary flow, that anybody who reaches to the brand page, the next step for him or her is payment, right? So I would again show a bold line, and then in the wireframe itself, in the flowchart itself, I will try to describe in very small manner that what does the search bar do. Search allows me to reach the product listing page. Yeah, and I will connect it through some diagram, maybe again a normal line, right? Another thing that I would ideally say from my experience as a PM is whenever you use arrow bars, right? Arrow bars are primarily used to show directions. The point is not that you cannot just say that I can put an arrow somewhere. Arrow means that you're putting something in a directional manner, right? But when you're not using an arrow bar, it typically means I am trying to explain something. So this, because it's a non-arrow button, it automatically tells the designer or the tech team specifically who are implementing that flowchart or looking at that flowchart that this is not a direction, this is an explanation. Yahan tak baat clear aa gayi? Is it very clear, guys? Till now, what happens in a flowchart? Is it very clear? Awesome. Awesome. Now, once you have functionally made the flowchart, then you move towards the wireframe layer, right? This is something that is called as a wireframe layer. Now, again, I told you, wireframes are not the visual representation of the product. A wireframe tells the user what the user should understand and should be able to do with the product. It's not a visual representation, but a wireframe also communicates to the user that what is important and what is not that important. Like, for example, my core goal is for a user to reach the product page. For example, that's my core goal, that how do I design an app in which a user, a e-commerce app in which a user from the homepage screen eventually reaches to the product page screen. That is something that I want to showcase. Right now, I just created a flowchart for it. What I do primarily is I just from any of the places, and the best way is that's why you should use a very good tool. Most of the tools have those elements made in, right? For example, if I have to effectively create a mobile interface, I'll just go here and primarily search. Draw.io gives you a lot of flexibility, by the way. So I can just write mobile and see, I get a bunch of mobile screens. I just put it across here, make it slightly larger. So the design team or the engineering teams understand that it's a mobile screen. Or if not this, maybe the most commonly used structure. This is the most commonly used structure. It's just available. You don't even have to make it, right? It's just there. So there are certain, so even before I try to create a wireframe, let me give you some 3-4 elements on which how do you effectively choose a wireframing tool, right? The first thing that you should look at is that, is the tool able to give you the core dimensional aspects of the core viewport structures? What I mean by viewport is basically the screen size, right? Nowadays, there are multiple screen sizes through which we interact with information. One is mobile, second is tablet, third is desktop, fourth is any website or any interface, maybe TV also, right, is an interface through which we interact with the internet and use websites and applications, right? So the tool should have those basic layouts already built in so that you don't have to put an effort. So the first thing that you have to look at is the basic layouts, the basic design layouts should be already there as a product manager, and always choose that tool. The second thing that you should functionally also look at is that the tool should be able to give you some sense of sharing ability, very easy, right? So here what I can do is, once I create a wireframe, I can export it as a PNG, JPG, SVG, PDF, HTML, XML, whatever I want to put across, right? Third, ideally, this tool doesn't allow you. The third thing that you should look at is, while you're creating a wireframe, is primarily that it should give you some ability of collaboration. For example, right, I created a wireframe and Parth is another PM, for example, right? And I just want to discuss with him that whether this makes sense or doesn't make sense. So it is not like I should be able to just download a PNG, then he will open the PNG, then he will try to edit that PNG and send it back to me. The tool should have a collaborative structure built in itself, right? Draw.io doesn't have that, but it's a simple tool. Like, more often than not, you will have advanced tools in your companies whenever you are working in a startup. Something like Balsamic will be there, Miro will be there, and a lot of other tools would be there. I use it just for the simplicity of purpose, right? The fourth thing that I would ideally also recommend from while choosing a wireframing tool is that it should have most of your general purpose actions already listed, like creating a circle, creating a heading, creating a dotted line, creating a miscellaneous structure, right? That should already exist, right? Now, if these 3-4 things, I will repeat again. First, the viewport structures, which is basically whether it's a mobile device, whether it's a desktop device, whether it's a tablet device, whether it's a TV device, those layouts should already exist. That's one, right? Second, sharing ability should be very simple because wireframes are collaboratively made, right? Third, that basically it should have a collaboration structure while I'm designing the wireframe. That's the third structure. And the fourth structure that I'm looking at is that it should also give me multiple elements to play with, right? Which can be a circle, which can be something like a polygon or a line or a dotted line or whatever, etc. I'm trying to do across here, right? So that is something that you choose. Now, again, coming back to our core flow, the wireframe. Now here what you see is that I have taken a functional layout of a mobile screen. And the first thing that you see is that I've created a large search bar, right? What does it tell you? There are two aspects here. One, that it tells you that I've given it a large real estate, or the size of the button is larger and it's in the first fold. That typically means this search bar is far more important than launch of the month widget that I'm showing there. So the higher the size, typically the larger value prop that I'm putting across. Does that make sense? So you would see that the add to cart button, right? If it's a primary button, right? It is typically very, very easily discoverable. And rest of the buttons on the screen might be small buttons, but add to cart and buy now buttons are like very big, right? Because you want to showcase it to the customer. It's a primary intended. So the first learning that you have in a wireframe while you're making a wireframe, the larger the size, the more the visibility. It should not be that randomly kuch bhi utha ke you just put it randomly and make the search bar very smaller like this much, and everybody will understand. No, the designer will not. The way that you have to put it across is, if you are making the search bar larger, it communicates it to the designer that you're saying that this is the area of emphasis. Does that make sense? Right? Give me a sense. Give me a yes or no. Does that make sense or not? Awesome. Awesome. Absolutely. Now, what is the next thing that I want to talk about? The next thing that I want to talk about is, while you're moving from top to bottom, right? The elements which are of similar size, right, ideally have similar value, right? For example, if I want to present two stores, so this is a homepage screen and it's the infinite scroll screen, primarily. If you move from top to bottom, you see that this launching iPhone 8s, the beast, this looks like a banner, right? I'm moving from top to bottom. Another thing comes across as Zara summer collections, which is of similar size. So what do you see the next thing here? You see that the launching iPhone 8s as a banner primarily, and then you see the Zara summer collections, they are of almost similar real estate, right? What does that tell you? That typically tells the end user as well as the designer that both hold equal importance, right? That is also very important. So whenever you are designing a section, right, you have to put it across like that. Third thing, the elements which are in proximity in a wireframe, which are similar, which are like electronics, clothing, they should be at a same information hierarchy structure. So I'll give you one very simple example. If you go to Amazon.com, how many have seen, have you seen the strip below the search bar where categories are listed? Give me a yes or no. Just below the search bar, you see that the categories are listed. But ऐसा क्यों नहीं होता कि यार कि once it's written books and somewhere it's written Zara t-shirt, it's not a category. Why does that not happen? It can very well happen, right? But why do you think at a particular information layer, the same elements which are in proximity, like SIP, I am talking about a category level structure, right? I'm talking about an information layer structure. So even the electronics, clothing, home are different categories, right? But all three are categories. It's not like I have showcased an iPhone here. Sometimes we do that, but majority of the cases we will not. Sometimes if I know that, okay, my iPhone is the highest selling product. Like if you go to Sony Live, like I'll give you a very simple example. Let me open a Sony Live. Okay, so now you know that I have a Sony Live subscription. Sad, but anyways, yes, Sharan has written the absolute right thing. Absolutely right. Let me open it across. So you see this. Here are TV shows, originals, sports, movies, premium, whatever games. So these are all categories, right? But you see just one show listed here, which is Shark Tank. Why do you think it would happen? It is an anomaly, right? But why? Okay, it's a hook. Yes, it's trending because primarily it is something that you know that it's going to channelize a lot of my users. It's a high priority item, right? That's why I've mentioned the launch of the month primarily here, right? But rest are functional categories, right? Now, what I've done here is, again, so I created a basic structure. In the wireframe, I gave a sense of basically the visual design, that basically what are the elements, how it would look like, right? How the wish list would look like. Then I've primarily clicked on that. If somebody clicks on the search button, how does the search screen look like? Right? And that is the second step. That's the second page that I've talked about. Then the third page. Now coming here, right? Tell me guys, till now we have learned some things here, right? What does this page tell you from a wireframe standpoint? That on the product listing page, I've shown the larger picture of the product, right? Give me a second. I'll just, where is the chat window? Where did it go? Sorry. Give me a second. Yes. So you see that primarily there is a large picture of a product, some information of the product. I see 3 buttons here: share, similar, add, and then buy now and add to cart. But buy now and add to carts are like large, huge. What does it tell you? What does this tell you? It is just opposite to what I just told you. I told you intended action should be on top. But what does this tell you? Here the intended actions are at the bottom. But why? Give me a reason for that. Why do you think the intended actions here are at the bottom? Buy now and add to cart is the intended action for a product. Nope. The reason for that is because when I'm purchasing a product, I need to make up my intent. While I'm discovering a product, I have already thought of that intent, that what I want. That's why my primary action is not to basically purchase the product, but to discover the product. So I don't want to waste my time and effectively do it, right? But while I'm making an intended purchase, I need information, and then only I would be able to click on the buy now or add to cart button. So what did you understand? When the intent is of action, of engagement primarily, then you need information for people to understand why that engagement is important, right? But when the intended action is of discovery, right, then I am already thought of this thing, that what I want to discover. So my communication, that discovery element is already sorted. मैं गाड़ी के शोरूम में तो तभी जाऊंगा ना जब मैंने सोच लिया होगा कि मैं गाड़ी खरीदूंगा. That's how it will work, right? Yes. So logically, the presence of the most important icon on top or on bottom is also dependent on the type of action the user has to take. Is that clear? Give me a yes or no. Amazing, 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 right? So what I did is, again, in the same way that I created a flowchart, I started with the first screen. Then I started with the second screen. And now in every screen, I have tried to put across what are the structures that will work. Like if I want to put across what will happen in the account section, in the same structure of visual hierarchy, I will present my orders on top, my wallet below, and then what are those elements which are not very lucrative to the customer, I will put it across in a slightly smaller manner, right? Then same with wish list, right? Now I want to communicate that I'm launching a future of a brand store. So I created a wireframe. So one more thing that I want to talk very, very critically to you guys. In a wireframe structure, you don't make all screens. You only make those flows which are part of the feature that you're building. अगर मैं सबके flows बनाने लग जाता तो this will be like 500 screens. Does that make sense? Give me a yes or no. One more part I'm saying. Whenever you're making a wireframe, you only describe those flows which are part of the feature structure that you're putting across for a value prop standpoint, right? So I wanted to put across a Flipkart premium app. That's why I wanted to show a Zara store. I created a store. I said that how the discovery of the store will happen. And I also, in that wireframe structure, also started describing that what will happen. So like I came on the sort page, I said the user can sort by all of those things. Now here, one more thing I want to talk about. In the sort button, I know for a fact that this shows sort, right? Now everybody will understand, but a designer will not be able to understand from a visual design perspective that sort by what, right? In the wireframe, I'm not showing it, but I am giving him or her enough information that these are the attributes through which you can sort, right? Similarly, while you're designing the search screen, I am saying I have just shown 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 products, right? It is not by mazak. It's not by ki aise hi bana diya hai. It shows to the designer that the maximum limit of search icons is 6 in that particular screen. So every action that you're taking in a wireframe structure has some context, right? Does that make sense? I will repeat from the starting point. First rule, that larger the value, larger the importance. One. Second rule, right? Elements of similar size on the wireframe are of similar importance. Okay? Third part, the elements, the information structure at a particular layer level has to be common, unless and until it's like an exception like Shark Tank, ya launch of the day, ya whatever you are doing, something like that. But at a particular information hierarchy level, things should be common. Fourth, you only make those flows which are relevant to the feature. And fifth, you try to describe, even if while you are making a structure across particular for a feature, if it has dense information, you put it outside the wireframe and put it as a text box. And again, the arrow flows are directional. The arrow flows are not random. That means you move from this page to this page, and primarily you move to the final page, whichever it is. Now I will stop here. This is where I will stop and take a pause. Over to you, Parth. Feel free.
Shravan, thank you so much for those wonderful insights. As any aspiring professional PM, this session has been truly amazing. Right, friends, I'm sure you all are in agreement with me. That was a wonderful session. As I mentioned earlier, the last 20 minutes, the last segment of this workshop is dedicated to Q&A. On the bottom of your screen, you guys can see a Q&A section. Feel free to put in your question as anonymous or as non-anonymous, as you wish to, and we will take it, and so on and so forth. We have a question from Siddharth. I'll take that first, Shravan. When we talk of MVP, what exactly does it mean? That's his question.
Sure. So I think MVP, I think the way it has been popularized in the social media, it's nothing like that. MVP basically means any simple product which gives you the maximum value of the functional which you are trying to deliver to the end user. The most simplistic version of the product which gives you 80% or 90% of the value that you want to deliver to the, like I'll give you a very simple example. An MVP, specifically if I want to build an MVP for a restaurant system, right, and restaurant coupon website, for example, right? Now, and this actually happened with Nearby, right? I'm giving you a live example. Nearby used to give a lot of coupons, and everybody would know Ankur Wariku's website, Nearby, right? He was the CEO of Ankur Wariku. But the coupon utilization was pathetic, right? Most of the time, what used to happen as a reason was that when people used to go to the restaurant would say the restaurant is full, aap abhi utilize kar hi nahi sakte, hamare paas seat hi nahi hai. We don't have a place, right? And people used to get back. What they did was very simply put a Google form there, that when are you coming with your wife? When are you coming with your family member? And most people started putting it that I'm putting it at 4 o'clock. So that information was relayed to the restaurant, and the restaurant used to automatically align it across, and the coupon utilization significantly went up. Now, no tech intervention, no design, nothing, just a simple problem solution, a solution which maximizes the value of the coupon, that particular real estate, 80%, 100%, right? So MVP basically means the most basic version of the product, which maximizes the business value to a point where the user says that it's a significantly great solution of whatever problem I am looking at. Awesome.
Next, Shravan, we have a question from Umang. He asks that what is the difference between wireframes and mockups, according to you, Shravan?
Wireframes are primarily, again, I told you, wireframes don't take care of the visual element, right? The color philosophy, the design philosophy, the button structure. It doesn't take care of that. Wireframes are basically to tell what the product should do, right? Not how the product should look. A mock-up is an actual representation of the visual element of the product, right? Basically, what should be the color, what should be the background, what should be the brightness, what should be the opacity of the background. So that, because aesthetics, mock-ups means wireframe with aesthetics. That's what a mock-up is, right? Mock-up is like the 90% actual version of the product. That this is the actual version, not a working product, but if you just see the designs, you would see that this is how the product will look like, right? So if I remove all the color, all the opacity, all the brightness of all the UI element from the BYJU'S app, it will just remain the wireframes, right? So wireframes are basically to show how the information is structured on the page. What are the core actions that you would want the user to take? Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Next, Shravan, an attendee has a question that he's working at TCS and he has never created this before. As a business analyst, according to you, in which companies can we create a wireframe as a part of the job?
I think wireframes are not necessarily a part of a company, but I would definitely say that what happens in service-based companies, I'll be very candid with you. Most of the requirements are already given by the client. You're just translating them into a document. So where most of the companies where ideation is limited, right? Because the difference between a product manager and typically a project manager or a product owner lies on the fact that project owner and these product owners or a project manager focus a lot more on the execution side, where the requirements or the ideation phase is like already done. But a product manager has both roles, like two legs of a man, right? Or two legs of a woman, right? It's like that. So wherever there is ideation, you would have to create a wireframe because you are thinking of a problem and you are thinking of a solution, right? And you have to build that structure that this is how the solution would look like. So that's the reason you're working as an analyst, and primarily in companies which are large enterprise level companies, which focus a lot more on client side or consulting side assignments. At most of the places, you don't create wireframes or don't do a lot of ideation. That's why I think, well, that's my assumption. I don't know your background. It should be the reason that you would not. So most product-led companies where the growth is PLG, PLG basically means product-led growth, right? There you do a lot of wireframing, lot of brainstorming, a lot of design thinking. There you build a lot of wireframes. Yeah.
Next, we have Prajesh, and he's asking the question that while managing the product, do we need to make wireframes for the whole product journey from initial search at home build till payment connection, or is it otherwise?
It really depends on feature to feature, right? Wireframes basically means like if you're just building a search feature, it can be 2 screens. Very much, right? So it really depends on the journey that you have to cover up, right? Very much. Like if you're building a wireframe of, like if you're building an MVP, right? In an MVP, you might have to shape up the entire product in the wireframe, right? That can be very much possible. But if you're building a specific portion, like if I want to build some sort of a section in the BYJU'S app, right? And I would just describe that part of the journey, not necessarily how the user comes in, how the user interacts with different elements of the page. I would just want to, so I told you again, before I was just completing the part of the session, only the behavior that I intend, that I am trying to drive through the feature, I will make the screens only for that in the wireframe. Yep.
Next, Lavanya has a question that can you stipulate the difference between a wireframe and a prototype?
Again, wireframe, prototype, and interactive prototype are different in terms of fidelity. Do you guys, how many of you understand what is fidelity? Fidelity basically means the improvements in the product, that basically the quality of the product. So once you move from a wireframe to a mock-up stage, you effectively improve in fidelity. You move from low fidelity to probably medium fidelity. You move from medium fidelity basically means where color, all of those, and the UI elements are there. Then from an prototype to an interactive prototype basically means you have also incorporated the interaction part, that if you click on a button, what should happen. So there are tools like Envision is one tool, or Figma is another tool in which you can build actually automation structures that if somebody clicks here, what should happen, what should be the next screen. So you improve in fidelity. So all three are different in terms of fidelity, but what the core value prop that you have to understand there is that while you are at a wireframe stage, you are more still in the conceptualization and the ideation stage. It's easy to change that. Once you move towards an interactive prototype, then you've put all your effort. It's very hard to change an interactive prototype. Because तुमने design बना लिया, color बना लिया, सब कुछ कर लिया. Now it's very hard to change that entire design structure, right? So ideally, you should be very clear on the hypothesis at a wireframing stage itself, right? And then once you're very clear, you've taken user feedback, you've done your usability testing, and it's a topic for other day. But whenever you make a wireframe, post that you do usability testing, some level of usability testing, that people are able to understand what the wireframe is trying to communicate, right? Once that is done, then you move towards a mockup, and then primarily from a mockup to an interactive mockup stage. Yeah.
Excellent. Shravan, what would be the USP if we tend to make a new UI for the changed consumer perception or consumer behavior?
Can you just repeat it? Sorry, I didn't hear it. Yeah.
So what would be the USP, the unique selling point, if we tend to make a new user interface altogether, a fresh user interface for the changed consumer behavior?
I think the USP is always very simple. Yeah? The USP is not UI. The USP is the fact that how simply the user is able to discover value. So if your UI is not able to effectively make the user, like I'll give you a simple example. Most of the people, so I'll ask a very simple question. How many of you have, most of the people transition from Android to Apple? Rarely kabhi hota hai ki Apple se Android pe janta jati hai. Is it correct? I'm saying there are people, maybe 2% people, but 98% of the times it's Android to Apple. Correct? Right? But 98% of the people who effectively move to Apple never move back to Android. Why does that happen? Because the experience of Android for the Apple or iOS ecosystem is so good, right? Or it's so simple to find value, or the joy of usage is that high that nobody would want to shift back. So any UI or UX is like a design layer for quickly discovering that value. You should check out the video at the Swagwala PM. There's a very good design thinking video. You would be able to understand it better. But what I'm trying to put across is any UX or UI interface is a layer on top of the product layer. Product layer designs basically what is the value. Design layer designs how quickly you can discover the value. Like ek aur chota sa example, like what is the value of a milk shop? That you can buy milk, as simple as that, right? What is the value of Google Maps there? That it gives you the shortest possible way to reach there. So think of the design layer as the Google Maps and think of the product layer as the milk shop. So the value is clear. Wherever the design is great and amazing, the discovery will happen as soon as possible.
Rajesh has another question. What are the free tools for wireframing, Shravan?
I think multiple are there. Balsamic is there, Miro is there, Figma is there, InVision is there, then Draw.io is there. N number of tools are there. You Google pe search karo, 90% of the tools you will find very, very easily. Like the best friend of a product manager is Google. It's as simple as that. Right,
but not just product managers in general.
In general, absolutely.
So now we are moving to the more generic kind of questions out of the wireframing domain. Aditya has a question: does a PM require IT background?
Not really. A PM doesn't require any background. If you just want to be, if you're a great thinker in life, if you're a good problem solver in life, anybody can become a PM. Please, this is one of the myths that I've tried to push across. You don't require anything primarily for it. You just need, and why? So I'll give you a very simple example. Why do folks in great MBA schools become good PMs? There is a logic, there's a rationale to it. The rationale to it is that in most MBA schools, you teach a lot of case studies, and case studies is all about problem solving. Right? And it comes from, and those are factual case studies. Like if you go to Masters Union, if you go to Harvard Business School, if you go to Stanford, if you go to any school, most of the times those KDs are real life case studies, and they are helping any folks in these particular places to improve their thinking of critical thinking ability. And that's why folks become great PMs from MU, from ISB, from multiple other places. The background is if you're a great problem solver, you can become a PM. It doesn't have any background requirement. Awesome.
Further, Shravan, Jayant has a question. He has an objective to earn the maximum revenue. And he was asking that should he make higher size for the products, which can provide him the highest return on value?
Higher size for the product, what does that mean?
It's a little unclear, Jayant. If you could retype whatever you're asking, it would be better. Till that time, we'll move on to Srinivas's question. Srinivas wants to ask, why doesn't PhonePe has search option? Just because of less features or something else is there?
Not really. I think first of all, I think they do have a search option, but if they don't, the logic is very simple. PhonePe has a single intent. It's a primary single intent platform. Do you go to PhonePe to discover things? You don't. You go to PhonePe to do transactions. So that's a single intent kind of a structure, right? So search is always built in a platform, in a product when you have to discover something. Google Pay would also not have search. But Swiggy will have search. Flipkart will have search because you're discovering something, right? But in a single intent platform where you know for a fact that this is the intent that there is one action that I want to achieve, why would you want to give search? Well, like it has no logic.
Sharan has a question. What is the best mechanism or good mechanism to validate that the wireframes do help in solving the problem at hand? How do you achieve the best mechanism to validate whether the wireframe is working or not?
The best mechanism to validate is just go to your target group, show the wireframe, do usability testing, and that's the best way you will be able to figure it out. But move out of your circle of influence. तुमने wireframe बनाया अपने दोस्त से दिखवाओगे तो अच्छा ही बोलेगा. As simple as that. So you have to go to the right target persona, but they should not be people in your influence circle. Yeah.
Siddharth has a question. What is the best POA for doing gap analysis of a working app?
I don't know what is POA, nor I know what is gap analysis.
It's a neat gap analysis in marketing term.
Yeah. So once again, what I would recommend, guys, as a product manager, primarily, please don't be fan of frameworks. I have never learned any frameworks in my life. I've tried to understood fundamental things. Please retype your question, Siddharth, maybe in a simpler manner for me to understand, and probably I can give you a great answer around it. Yeah.
Shashank has a question that can you please highlight what exactly product portfolio consists of, and how can we prepare for it?
Sure. So I think a product portfolio is a very interesting thing. A product portfolio is a very good way to showcase to someone what's your product acumen. A product portfolio typically starts off with you thinking of a problem, figuring out a problem, and then and it's a collection of problem sets that you have solved. Right? So a problem set would have one problem, and a problem should start from what is the size of the problem? How big is the problem? Like, why does it make sense? Some validation around it. Then what are the core pillars that the problems need to be solved, and what value would it add to the user? Then from that standpoint, you would move to the point, what are the core problems or core reasons, core pain points? That's why the problem is not yet solved. Right? Then you primarily move to the point that you prioritize those problems in that structure. That the most important thing here we have to solve is this. Like I'll give you a simple example. When Swiggy would have started, right, the functional problem that they were trying to solve is that will you be able to get food at the convenience of, so the first thing that they solved was supply chain, as simple as that, right? Then they scaled supply, then they effectively scaled their demand and etc. and whatever. So first they figured out that there should be enough restaurants on the place so that I'm able to cater to the demand, and also I have a very good supply chain so the order delivery happens functionally. And that's why if people remember, Swiggy started as a hyper-local delivery app. So you typically prioritize those problems, then come up with solutions that these are the possible solutions, may work, may not work. And then below that, you put out some metrics that how do I measure the success of that solution? So in a typical, and once you have collection of those problems, like that is typically what is called a product portfolio. And it's a very good way to showcase to an interviewer that you can think like a product manager, or you can think like an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Right, Shravan, this is the last question for today's session. It comes from Siddhant. He is asking how effective is A/B testing in terms of zeroing down on features, or how do you decide when to opt for A/B testing?
I think A/B testing should not be done in very early stages. Very early stages, it is more about the value prop. A/B testing is far more relevant when you have a sizable audience on your app. There are two reasons, or your product. There are two reasons around it. One, once you have a sizable audience, the cohorts of people, like I'll give you a very simple example. When a university has like 100 people, you can effectively figure out what's the persona. So all of them can have a very similar persona. But once they have like 10,000 people, there can be 50 different personas of people. Right? So any subject which is valuable to one might not be valuable to the other persona. So in that case, you typically try to do A/B testing when you have large personas, because you cannot build a feature and ship it out for all 100% of the audience. Right? It's very poor. Like if Swiggy makes a feature, like a very simple example, if Netflix tomorrow builds a feature in which you can filter films by Tamil, will it be valuable to all? No, it's not. Obviously, they're a global audience, right? So for them, A/B testing makes a lot of sense, right? But it really depends on the stage of the company, right? And simultaneously, you want to do A/B testing because it should not hurt the business. That tomorrow, if you do launch some product and that feature miserably fails, it might lead to a lot of loss of revenue or users to the product. So you would ideally want to do it on a small base and then try to see that whether that particular insertion is valuable or not. So in early stages of the company, not that relevant, because you are trying to fix the core value prop. If the core value prop is wrong only, then your hypothesis only is wrong. So A/B testing won't help any which way. in scale, when you reach a larger scale like 500,000, 1 million users or something on those lines, these are just tentative numbers. Don't take it with a pinch of salt. There are companies which do A/B testing at 50,000 users also, right? But typically when you have a large set, so in order to figure out multiple personas, that's one. The second reason, that in order to effectively minimize the damage it might cause, right, you do A/B testing. So those are the two places that you would do. Yeah.
I think that should cap off this session. Shravan, on behalf of Masters Union and all the attendees, let me take this opportunity to extend a very warm vote of thanks to you. You have conducted an amazing session and you have given us a lot of value today. We can see there are a lot of thank you notes pouring in the chat box. We are truly indebted to you for this value addition. I want to thank all of you for joining in today. If you all have any questions regarding Masters Union, please feel to reach out to me. And once again, Shravan, thank you. If you want to add anything.
Thank you, Parth. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys. Awesome.